This is, beyond a shadow of a doubt, one of the craziest stories I have heard in a long time, with more twists and turns than the Space Mountain ride at Disneyland. You are not ready for this. I suppose I should just dive right into the story. There's really no way to tiptoe around this or to intro this. A couple days ago, the internet was rocked with an extremely shocking story that nobody really saw coming. When on August 9th, multiple internet news sources announced that liltay had passed away. Liltay is a name that hasn't really been heard in a long time, but it was a name that was heard a lot 6 years ago. It was a name that was extremely well known, but then very quickly kind of faded into obscurity, until suddenly it was brought back on August 9th, and well, it was shocking. It was extremely shocking because nobody saw this coming. Nobody predicted that liltay would pass away on August 9th. Or did she? News story after news story after news story said the same thing. Liltay has passed away. Liltay is dead. But there's something off. A lot of people noticed, or at least I noticed, that with all of these news stories, there was one thing that they all had in common and something that was missing, something very vital in telling this news. And that's the fact that there was no details. Every single news source, whether that be online professional news sources, the crappy ones that you find on Snapchat, and even the fish, even the precious fish who has never done anything wrong in their lives, all of them were missing very vital information. How did this happen? How did liltay die? And you'd think that before you post a story of this significance, you'd have a little bit more details. But before I had time to dwell on this, not even 24 hours later, all of these same sources put out another story, claiming that the news that they had just stated was incorrect. That liltay was actually alive. What? I know I just went over a lot, but before I get any deeper, I think it's important that I bring some information, or at least some details about liltay. You don't need to know the whole story, and frankly, there are videos out there that can do it better than me, but there are a few things that you need to know about liltay. If you haven't heard of liltay before, back in 2016, 2017, liltay was an extremely popular influencer, not necessarily because of the things she did, but because of who she was. She was a 9-year-old internet influencer whose entire influencing was just flashing cash and showing off fancy things and being, well, extremely rude, I suppose, and just trashing on a multitude of different people because they're poorer than she is. And that was her entire internet personality. Everybody liked it because it was interesting to see. Nobody ever saw this coming, and she started beef with a lot of people, one of which includes Rice Gum. Yes, Rice Gum. This is during the age of Rice Gum and Leafy, so a very different age of YouTube, an age that YouTube is currently not. A very different age. liltay's fame, however, did not last long after it was revealed that her entire account and her entire personality was run by her brother, and that this entire channel and everything that she did was coached by her brother, which for some reason came as a massive shock to the internet. I guess. Apparently it's a really shocking fact that a 9-year-old is not in charge of a channel that has hundreds of thousands of viewers, and that she herself was able to get all this money and able to buy multiple luxury cars. Apparently that was a shock to a lot of people. But that was the story, and as soon as it came out that her brother was behind everything, or what we thought was behind everything, that for some reason turned a lot of people off, and she started to very quickly and rapidly decline in followers and views. And then it took another turn when it found out that her mom was actually behind everything, because the cars that she was in her videos was actually her boss's cars. And more than that, these are cars that she was filming and using without the boss's permission. So it's just a mess. It is an entire just sloppy mess. And then there was drama with the dad trying to take liltay to Canada and trying to get her away from the influencer life and away from her mom and her brother, which then started an entire tirade of the mom and the brother saying that the dad is actually abusive. And then there was this giant back and forth, the details of which are extremely messy, and then everything just kind of faded into obscurity. And that was kind of that. And then as the years went by with more pressing things happening in the world, the name of liltay was quickly forgotten, up until this point, where she was dead and then not dead within the span of 24 hours, which has certainly made people start talking about liltay again. But why? How did this happen, and why did this happen? You know, at first I thought this was going to be a video about how news channels and people who are reporting news are so quick to jump on a story before they have all their information, but I can't even say that, because the news came from liltay's channel. That's as good as a source as you can get, you know? It wasn't like a rumor that they heard from the old windmill. This was something that came from liltay's channel, presumably by her family, which is a very understandable way to get information out if she did pass away, which she didn't. That's like somebody on the Queen's Twitter saying, "Oi, the Queen done kicked a bucket in it," and then you would logically assume that the Queen kicked the bucket. There's no better news source. And then very quickly, these statements were rescinded, and then liltay's brother came out saying that the account was hacked, he doesn't have access to it anymore, and that it was all just fake, and to just ignore it. But this has made people start looking at the situation a little bit more closely, because this wouldn't be out of character for the family, unfortunately. Because there's two possibilities here on what happened. A, what the family claims and that the account was hacked, which is very much a possibility, or the second option, and that's that the family purposely put the story out there in order to get the name of liltay out there again, in order to get her more popularity and relevance again. The second one sounds crazy in any normal circumstance until you consider the family. This is the family that made their 9-year-old sister, their 9-year-old daughter, become the face of this giant brand, and having her do and say outlandish things all so that they could profit off of it. The same family that coached her into saying all of these things in a very tough and demeaning way. And the same family that literally treated her like a piece of meat and like a piece of merchandise rather than an actual being, having custody battles over her, some of which for good, some of which for bad. Again, the entire family situation with the custody battle with the dad is, it's just too messy to say which is true and which is not. And I don't know if that court thing was solved at all, but regardless, it wouldn't be out of character for the family to do something like this, unfortunately, because the family used her as a social media model while they hid behind the camera and profited off her from the shadows. And here's the thing, both of these things, these two options are just as likely as the other. It is highly possible that her account got hacked, and it is highly possible that her family did this on purpose for relevance. The thing is, we just don't know. There's not a whole lot of evidence for either, but at the end of the day, it's still just a really unfortunate and sad situation. It's good that liltay is still alive and that ended up being fake. That's a really good thing to happen, don't get me wrong. It's just unfortunate that her name and her personality and her very face is still being used as merchandise rather than, you know, an actual person. But I guess we're gonna find out soon, because if this was a giant display by the family in order to get relevance back for liltay, then it's likely she'll make a video soon. If not, then it was just a hacker, which is great. But if she does, then it really is a sad situation, because then that means the family is still profiting off her social media influence. And then it would become more likely that they actually put that post on her story. But at the end of the day, we really don't know anything yet. What we do know is that liltay is alive. Hopefully she's well, and hopefully her situation is better than it was all those years ago. But I suppose for right now, we just don't know. All in all, this is one of the craziest stories that has happened on the internet for a while, and hopefully we get more clarification in the future. But that's all we have right now, and that's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, if indeed you still are. My name is Brockster, and I bid you all adieu.